The Mandalorian has got to be one of the most exciting shows that has premiered in recent memory. This all-new expansion of the Star Wars universe is a thrilling addition to the canon, and we can already tell it's going to be getting better and better. Already, Episode 2 gave us a lot of new information, and that ending. If you haven't seen the episode yet, beware, because we're going to go deep into everything that was revealed at the end of Episode 2. So much has already happened in the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. It's clear the rest of the season is going to be a real trip. We might as well just start out with a quick recap of what went down in Episode 2, just so we're all on the same page. So, at the end of Episode 1, we saw the Mandalorian having just discovered the bounty he was tasked to retrieve, and it's none other than a little baby Yoda. Not actually Yoda, of course, but an infant of the same species, who we will continue to refer to as Baby Yoda, not only because we don't have another name for it yet, but it's also a really adorable name. After taking out the IG-11, the robot bounty hunter, as it tried to eliminate Baby Yoda, the Mandalorian was then faced with the question of his own moral boundaries. As everyone in the galaxy is struggling to rebuild after the fall of the Empire and the events of the Return of the Jedi, there is a lot he's willing to do for a paycheck. But now, with the 50-year-old Baby Yoda in his possession, is he willing to deliver it to the client? And to a possibly dangerous fate? Well, in Episode 2, we find out that he might be willing to do so after all. He seems to have recovered from his initial surprise and is on his way back to the client with the bounty in tow. And yet, this is only Episode 2 after all. So chances are, it's not going to be smooth sailing all around. Pretty early on, the pair find themselves in the middle of a space lizard surprise attack. It's quickly revealed that these guys, known as Tranchidans, I think that's how you pronounce it, have a tracking device, or fob, as Werner Herzog so delightfully called it, letting us know that the client isn't the only one after the small green baby. We see, later that evening, that Baby Yoda seems intent to climb out of his little egg and makes his way over to where the Mandalorian is trying to fix himself. Clearly, Baby Yoda is trying to communicate something to old Mando, but he's having none of it and chucks him right back in his travel egg for good. After a run-in with some Jawas, who you'll remember as the scavenger species from A New Hope, the Mandalorian and Baby Yodes, they find themselves quite stranded on this desert planet, and make their way to Quill for help. While they visit the Nick Nolte-voiced Ugnaught creature, Quill remarks how he doesn't understand why everyone is so desperate to get their hands on the little Grinch-looking fella, revealing one of the major questions from this entire episode. But we're getting there. In a fun and unexpected moment from little Yoda, when the Mandalorian is trying to figure out how to fix his ship, the baby swallows a space frog whole. Hey, baby's gotta eat. While renegotiating with the Jawas in order to get his ship parts back, the scavengers present a couple of different possible trades. First, they want his Beskar armor, which the Mandalorian clearly has no intention of giving up. Then they float the idea of taking the Baby Yoda off his hands, which again is refused. Finally, they request that the Mandalorian retrieve a mysterious egg. He agrees, and the whole gang head over to another part of the desert, where Mando and his baby bounty set out to find this precious egg. The Mandalorian wisely leaves the baby outside a very ominous cave and makes his way in alone. Not so fast though, as he is immediately intercepted by a gigantic space rhinoceros. He does his best against this old rhino, but is clearly no match for the creature, who does a fair bit of damage to our hero. But that's when it happens. Just as it looks like the Mando will be defeated by the rhino, Baby Yoda interferes and stops the giant creature in its tracks using the Force. It is clearly a huge effort for the little Baby Yoda, but he is able to hold off the rhino long enough for Mando to take it out and retrieve the egg, which turns out to just be a regular old egg, somewhat anticlimactically. And the Jawas go nuts for it. The episode ends with both Quill and the Mandalorian wondering over the extent of this mysterious baby's powers. And while the Mandalorian seems to set off to continue his directive and deliver the baby to the client, we have to wonder if he will follow through. After all, the Mandalorian is supposedly hardened by the harsh realities of the galaxy, and still looking to make a profit. The little guy did just save his life, however, and sending a baby off to an uncertain fate in the hands of a clearly menacing man with no name takes a whole other level of heartlessness that we just don't think the Mandalorian possesses. Now, it's pretty obvious to all those involved that this little Baby Yoda is going to be a much bigger part of the series. First of all, we feel pretty confident that the Mandalorian isn't just going to chuck this big-eyed little creature back into the hands of a sinister man flanked by stormtroopers. What kind of hero would that be to build a show around? Not one we're all that interested in watching, we'll tell you that much. There is basically no scenario that involves the client lovingly raising the Baby Yoda to be the very best version of himself that he can be, putting away a few dollars every month for a college fund, and taking him to Father Yoda picnics. Seeing as how he was fine with the Mandalorian executing Baby Yoda in the first place, we're thinking he doesn't have the warmest feelings about him in general. So, why does everyone in the galaxy seem intent on getting their hands on this green baby? Well, the most obvious answer would be his access to the Force. Seeing as how the show is directly affected by the events of the first 3 Star Wars movies, the chances are pretty high that the client and most other residents of the galaxy have at least heard of Yoda, Jedis, and the Force. Yoda is a 900-year-old Jedi Master, and there is no way that he isn't an absolute legend by now. With everyone scrambling to recover from the catastrophic events from 5 years earlier, a vulnerable child of the same species as one of the most powerful beings in existence would either be worth a lot or could offer protection and security for whoever lays their hands on it. And what about that species after all comes from? All we know is that he is of an ancient race, who clearly possess a whole lot of power. We've only ever seen one other of the species, and that was of course Yaddle, who we saw in The Phantom Menace. She was also an incredibly powerful Jedi Master, so Force sensitivity seems to run in the family. Maybe the Mandalorian will finally be our chance to learn more about this ancient genealogy, and where Yoda came from almost 1,000 years before. But even if the client were able to get his hands on Baby Yoda and raise him as his own, those plans might not be all he has in mind. Eagle-eyed fans noticed something very interesting in the first episode of The Mandalorian that might just allude to a much larger and more sinister plot that could develop over the course of the series. They noticed that Dr. Pershing, who appears to be working with the client in the scene in which he first sends the Mandalorian on his mission, is wearing a uniform with a very specific badge on it. This emblem happens to match the one worn by the clones on Kamino. This has led to the theory that Dr. Pershing might be an expert cloner, and could be part of a much larger plan to clone Baby Yoda in order to make some sort of force-wielding Yoda army, or worse. It's also entirely possible that they want to use Baby Yoda's DNA to develop a midichlorian farm that could be harvested and injected into anyone who isn't necessarily Force sensitive, giving them the same power as the Jedi. It is an extremely dystopian possibility, but the fact that Dr. Pershing seemed very adamant that the baby be kept alive in the first place, it is not out of the realm of imagination that things are about to get a whole lot more creepy. The galaxy is in a vulnerable position at the time the show takes place, which makes it perfect for those looking to do a little evil. Another interesting thing to note that could very well become a part of the Baby Yoda story is that, at 50 years old, Baby Yoda clocks in at the exact same age as Anakin Skywalker, who, by the way, we know at this point is dead. But, were he alive, they would be the same age. So far, it seems that the Mandalorian is trying to stay away from the Skywalker storyline. But then, why make Baby Yoda precisely 50 years old? Sure, it might just be a funny image of a twin to Anakin, to balance out the Force if things with him went south, which they did. Very, very south. Darkness rises, and light to meet it, and I warned my young apprentice that as he grew stronger, his equal in the light would arise. Look, we're not saying that Anakin Skywalker will be making any appearances, but the Force is all about balance. So the idea that Baby Yoda could be this being of light, put out by the Force in order to counter the pure darkness that was Darth Vader, doesn't sound all that far-fetched to us. We know that Darth Vader is 5 years gone, and time is an ever-expanding landscape. Maybe Baby Yoda, coming into his power during the time of the Mandalorian, was very much on purpose. So much of this show is built on the fact that the galaxy is seriously struggling, trying to regain its footing after the revolution and the collapse of the Empire. And then suddenly, this baby shows up on the scene, hunted by various evildoers and hard done by scavengers, and might just be the one who could help it all find its way back to the light. Honestly, we'd love to see it. The creators of The Mandalorian are clearly amazing at keeping things under wraps. We did not see Baby Yoda coming, so we really have no idea. What about you? What did you think of the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian? Are they the Star Wars revival you've been waiting for, or a disappointment? What do you think the client has planned for Baby Yoda? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to keep up with all the latest from CBR.